네, 그럼 지금부터 오늘의 특별 세션을 시작하겠습니다. 여러분 안녕하십니까? 저는 이번 특별 세션 주한대사 라운드 테이블의 사회를 맡은 TV조선 기자 이정민입니다. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jungmin Lee, your MC for today, and we will now open the special session, a round table with ambassadors. 네, 이번 세션에서는 한국에서 대사로 와 계신 세계 각국의 대사분들과 다양한 얘기를 나눠볼 텐데요. 특별히 이번 세션은 송경진 혁신경제 사무총장께서 좌장을 맡아 수고해 주시겠습니다. 송경진 Executive Director, Innovative Economy Forum will moderate this session. Please welcome Ms. 송경진, Dr. 송경진 with a warm round of applause. 모두 뜨거운 박수로 환영해 주시기 바랍니다.
감사합니다. Thank you, Jungmin, for your kind introduction and for your tireless effort, indeed, toward making this entire forum a great success. 저 말할 때는 마스크를 벗고 말하라고 하셔가지고 제가 마스크 벗고 하겠습니다. I just took off my face mask because I was asked to do it when speaking. Well, let me first welcome our audience joining us virtually online. And let me briefly explain why we made this a very special session. This session is specially made to provide a venue and an opportunity of exchange of information, thoughts, and views, not just among the ambassadors themselves, but with the Korean general public. You know, we wanted to we wanted to provide a venue for you people to sound out what you think is important to share from your perspective, and also from also to the Korean policymakers and public. Continued process of such, I believe, will catch the ears of the policymakers and the authorities concerned. We will make this efforts continuously, and we certainly need more of this exchange. We have, against this background, we have 6 distinguished ambassadors joining us from different regions. We try to reflect the regional balance in our invitation. We have on my immediate left. We have Ambassador Catherine Raper from Australia. She actually represents the Indo-Pacific region. And next to her, we have Ambassador Maria Castillo Fernandez, EU Ambassador Maria Castillo Fernandez, representing the European Union. And then we have Ambassador Bruno Figueroa from Mexico, representing the Latin American region. He's actually also the Dean of the Ambassadors of the Latin American region in Korea. And next to him, we have Ambassador Ramzi Teymurov from Azerbaijan, representing the Central Asia region. And on my farthest left, we have Ambassador Bader Al-Awadi from Kuwait. And he's also representing the Middle East Arab world. He's Dean of the Arab Diplomatic Corps in Korea. Well, with that, we have one more ambassador joining in no time, Ambassador Mwende Muwinzi from Kenya. She will represent the African region. I must actually be introducing all these ambassadors with a stellar career to you, but to save the time for their presentations and for their talks, I will ask you to refer to their bios already posted in the Global Forum website. Well then, without much further ado, let me invite Ambassador Catherine Raper to share with us what she thinks are important in the Australia-Korea and Korea-Australia relations at the bilateral level and also at the multilateral level. The floor is all yours, Catherine.
Thank you very much, Dr. Song, and it's an absolute pleasure to join you here, as well as my fellow ambassadors and the audience, both in the room and online today, at TVjoson's Global Leaders Forum Ambassadors Roundtable. As you foreshadowed, I'd like to speak a little bit today about Australia-Korea relations and our plans to elevate our relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership in this, our 60th anniversary year of diplomatic relations. Australia and Korea relations, I'm pleased to say, have always been close. The first Australian missionaries came to Korea over 130 years ago, and these Australians played a critical role in establishing schools and hospitals right across the Korean Peninsula. But it was Australia's engagement on the Korean Peninsula was really cemented by our participation in the Korean War. Australia committed more than 17,000 troops to join the UN forces in Korea, and sadly 340 Australian soldiers lost their lives. In 1961, diplomatic relations were established between Australia and Korea, making this year the auspicious 60th anniversary of diplomatic relations. In many ways, our bilateral relationship has evolved organically, driven by our complementary economies and strong trade relationship. Australian energy and resources exports have been powering Korea for decades. And today it's likely that the gas in your home has been imported from Australia, the electricity keeping the lights on has been generated from Australian coal, and the steel in your cars, buildings and chopsticks and in Korean exports is made from Australian iron ore. The 60th anniversary is a great opportunity to plot a path forward to tackle opportunities and challenges, particularly in our region, the Indo-Pacific region, on the basis of our shared interests and values. Australia's vision for the Indo-Pacific is of an open, inclusive and resilient region based on rules, norms and respect for sovereignty. Australia, with Korea, can contribute to maintaining and strengthening the rules-based order that underpins this vision. We are both open, liberal democracies committed to freedom, the rule of law and democratic institutions. We are both open, export-oriented market economies, trading our goods and services around the world. And we are both vocal champions of and advocates for international law, free societies and open economies, underpinned by strong, independent institutions. That is why, in June this year, Prime Minister Morrison from Australia and President Moon from the Republic of Korea met on the sidelines of the G7+ in Cornwall and agreed to elevate our relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership. This elevation is well overdue. Like Australia, Korea is a country of consequence. It is no longer a shrimp between the whales. Korea has the political, economic and cultural power to forge new partnerships and buttress institutions that support its interests. One of the most tangible ways Australia and Korea can demonstrate this upgraded commitment is by working together to address the global challenge of climate change. President Moon's commitment to net zero emissions by 2050 will require significant changes to Korea's industrial and energy policies. Korea's transition to a cleaner energy mix is presenting new opportunities for cooperation. We are natural partners to develop the low emissions technologies that will tackle emissions and create jobs. Last month in Rome, I'm very pleased to say that President Moon and Prime Minister Morrison agreed the Australia-Republic of Korea Low and Zero Emissions Technology Partnership. Under this partnership, the Australian and Korean governments will work with the private sector to develop crucial new technologies and bring them to commercial parity with traditional energy sources. These new technologies will include clean hydrogen, green steel and iron ore, and carbon capture and storage. Taking a technology-based approach will ensure that we reduce emissions and protect the environment while creating jobs and economic growth in both Australia and Korea. And as we look to the next phase of our relationship, the next 60 years, Australia and Korea will rely on each other as we deal with an increasingly uncertain, competitive and contested world. Australia's Indo-Pacific policies and the ROK's new Southern policy have much in common. Our strategic and defence cooperation is well advanced and supported by our 2+2 Foreign and Defence Ministerial Framework, and we are deepening our cooperation throughout Southeast Asia. And I'm excited by the hundreds of opportunities for collaboration that we have to look forward to. Korea is one of the world's largest investors in research and development, and Australia is a world leader in science, research and innovation, clinical trials and vocational training. We are strengthening collaboration between Australian and Korean universities and researchers so that together we will be at the forefront of new fields such as biotechnology, the circular economy, AI and robotics. And I'm very pleased that yesterday, on the 22nd of November, Prime Minister Morrison announced that from the 1st of December, fully vaccinated citizens from the ROK will be able to travel to some Australian states and territories, New South Wales, Victoria and the Australian Capital Territory, quarantine-free without needing to seek a travel exemption. As Australia begins to take steps to safely reopen to the world, the ROK is one of the first countries, along with Singapore and Japan, from which we will allow fully vaccinated eligible visa holders to visit quarantine-free. I would like to encourage as many visitors from the ROK to come to Australia as flights allow to further strengthen our economic, political, strategic and people-to-people ties. Thank you very much, Dr. Song.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'll speak in Korean about this good news about the COVID restriction relaxation. 여러분, 호주에서 12월 1일자로 한국 국민들에게 대해서는 이미 예방 접종, 백신 접종을 완료하신 분들께는 호주 입국 여행이 자유화 풀렸다고 합니다. 좋은 소식입니다. 네, 자, I have this light, very shiny, very bright. Maybe it's my, I don't know, Polestar or something. 북극성처럼 되게 빛나는데요. 눈이 부시네요. I have actually a number of questions for your presentation, about your presentation. Should I raise the questions now, or should I listen to all the ambassadors and then have a Q&A session? What do you think is better?
I suggest we listen to all of our presentations first and then come back to questions at the end.
Then Ambassador Maria Castillo-Fernandez.
Thank you so much, Dr. Son, and I'm very happy to be here on my first Global Leaders Forum in Korea. I just wanted to give you a little bit of hint of what is our agenda as European Union and why Korea matters to the European Union and to the European countries. As Ambassador Rapper also mentioned for Australia, also the relation between Europe and Korea is certainly a relation which is well developed. It's a strong relation. And it's now, I must say, in a phase of deepening and sharing together responsibilities. I would say that there is an enormous interest for Korea in the European capitals, and hope that soon there is more interest in Korea for Europe. We do see a difference. Look, even in pandemic, more than 40 working groups in all areas of economy, politics, and social, and innovation, and others are ongoing. And also we had at least 4 leaders meetings in all forms, virtual, bilateral, in the margins. That is important. We will have next week President of the European Council, Charles Michel, coming to Korea, certainly to present the Indo-Pacific strategy, which is certainly a very important strategy for us, and Korea is one of the key strategic partners in this Indo-Pacific strategy. We also have EU countries with a lot of interest. Just last year, 3 countries opened embassies in Korea, which is a lot as well. And also a lot of interest from business, trying to see if they can reach on. And don't forget, we are the top investor in Korea. So we are therefore, responding to a Korea that is certainly more assertive as an actor in the global stage. And we will like to see it more and more. We like to see Korea certainly sharing with us responsibilities in order to, try to find solutions to the big global challenges that we are all facing in this post-pandemic area. We also saw Korea in the G7, in the G20, very active with us. And there are so many things we share, values, interest, and therefore concerns. We see I&I in many areas important for us. What has dominated our agenda? It's mainly climate, like in many other cases. Working hand in hand, we are very happy that we push perhaps Korea to have more ambitious on the climate agenda before COP26. And now it's not over. This was a step in the good direction, but certainly we need to come and implement the promises. So the net zero 2050 that we both have. We have the Korean deal, the European deal to implement now, and also the carbon neutral goals. So we would like to work with Korea in these areas, and this opens also enormous opportunities for business. I mean, climate is a big revolution. The greening of our economies, of our societies, is an enormous transition that we all have to go through. And we have to do it together, sharing a lot of ways to do it. And it's a big potential for new business, new areas, new skills, new jobs, and opportunities. The other area where, of course, it's very important, and I imagine many of our countries are working, is in the digital front. We are going both to build better, greener, and digital, and certainly Korea is leading on the digital front. It has enormous capabilities, enormous force, enormous skills in the digital area, and therefore we are very interested, to focus our cooperation on digital and on innovation and research. Probably we will offer Korea a digital partnership that we make us, it's about cooperation in new digital technologies, ensuring supply chains that are very important. Semiconductors, of course, an area that comes to the mind of everyone. Korea and Europe also are part of this enormous supply chain, which is very important for the future transition that we are speaking. Health is very important. Perhaps you didn't know, but more than 75 or 80% of all the vaccines that were administered in Korea come from Europe. And that means that probably you and I have the same vaccines, but our certification of vaccines are not recognized nor in Europe nor in Korea. So I think that is a mismatch. That is making obstacles to mobility, to being able to build cooperation and relations. So we hope that, and we are working closely for these mutual recognitions of vaccination, especially in the case where we are all users the same vaccines. And therefore it doesn't make sense. So yes, hope this can be able we could soon be able to have this agreement in place. Finally, a word on security. The security in Asia matters to Europe, as I said, key in our Indo-Pacific strategy, but based on our rule-based order on freedom of navigation, certainly very important. We see it around the seas of Korea, not only in the South China Sea. Maritime security, cyber security, key areas where we are working together, and certainly cooperating more in naval presence. We have recently finalized with Korea and even Oman. And I look at my colleague from Kuwait, because we have a joint cooperation within different parts of the world, and we want Korea to be part of that global cooperation. We want to push Korea to take its part as a responsible, like-minded partner, based on multilateralism, rule-based order, and I think there we share the same values. This is about Korea's soft power together with European soft power. And there is so much there to do together. The role of us embassies here is certainly to build bridges, to sell Korea in Europe and sell Europe in Korea. And we are there as envoys trying to build bridges, trying to build trust and communication channels, also in times where it's so difficult, this communication and this mobility. Our role, therefore, is important, and thank you very much to the Global Leaders Forum to allow us to reach out to the public. I want to end with a very mentioning something that happened 2 weeks ago, and where we really reached out to the public and we saw the interest. We did next to Seoul Square and the Seoul Station, in one little square, we did all the Europeans, the Europe Language Days. You know, there are 22 languages in Europe, and here we are 24 countries. So we put stands showcasing the different languages. Oh, it was full. The queues to get into that little open square where especially families with children, and you see the eagerness of Korean children to try to learn more languages, and languages is enrichment, will allow you the facility to interact more with other cultures and other countries. So we were, you know, when I went there and see so much people, so much interest, spontaneous interest, I must say, you know, people just going out and then suddenly stopping there and interest to go. So we hope we can do that more, and at least there is a very big interest from public on Europe, not only in Europe as a tourist destination, but you know, in schools, there is more and more this interest, which I hope then will go up and in some years, therefore, put our relations in a more closer and more deeper partnership. Thank you very much.
Wow, that's very interesting. Do let us know next time you do it. 2주 전에 서울광장에서 유럽 언어의 날이라는 행사가 있었대요. 그 서울광장이 꽉 찼었다는데 본인 그 주최 측에서 생각하는 것보다 훨씬 더 많은 사람들이 왔고 어린아이들도 많이 왔고 아주 저 한국 사람들의 관심에 굉장히 놀랐다. 그 감사하다 이렇게 말씀하시는데요. 다음번에는 우리한테도 좀 알려주고 기회를 줬으면 좋겠어요. Do give us an opportunity next time. And excellent presentation with a lot of interesting points. We'll get back to that after we do all the presentations. Ambassador Bruno Figueroa from Mexico.
Thank you very much, Dr. Song, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of the TV조선 Global Leaders Forum today. I chose to talk today about the MICTA group. It's a group of 5 middle powers, that is Mexico, Indonesia, Turkey, Korea, and Australia. We are 5 dolphins among whales in this world. And why do I say that? You know that whales are big animals that are quite solitary. They only gather when they mate and have babies, but otherwise they go their own way in the sea and they fear nothing. On the contrary, dolphins are always together. They learn to defend themselves together and also to chase for food together. So that's the spirit of the MICTA group. We are together because we know that our voices are stronger if we are together in this world. MICTA is a diplomatic mechanism, quite flexible and informal by nature. It was formed 8 years ago, based on constant consultations and coordinations of their actions. It is truly a 21st century diplomatic tool because we rely on immediate communication as well as we can meet at the 4 corners of the world when needed be. We are middle powers sharing core values such as democracy, human rights, free trade, and we believe strongly in a multilateral order based on rules. And those rules can be changed based by consensus or strong majorities, not imposed unilaterally. And so we promote those values through diplomacy, dialogue, and consensus building processes. Until now, we have met at the level of foreign ministers 19 times all around the world, twice virtually since the COVID-19 pandemic. And the MICTA group has issued 32 joint statements and 12 joint communiques on a vast number of issues that are of great interest to the 5 of us. Just to give you a concrete example of how MICTA countries do and pursue active diplomacy and very positive diplomacy, I will mention to you what we did last year regarding the COVID-19 world crisis. When it was evident that the pandemic was everywhere in the world, we knew that we need to find a path to overcome this global crisis. And so the MICTA countries asked last year for unity, solidarity, and cooperation. Indonesia proposed the first United Nations General Assembly discussion, debate, and resolution on COVID-19. Then Mexico drafted the UN resolution that called for global and fair access to medicines, to vaccines, and to medical equipment. The Turkish ambassador at the United Nations at the time was also the president of the UN General Assembly, and he showed very strong leadership in having those discussions and the resolution adopted in an incredible short time. And just remember that last year, nobody was meeting at the UN, United Nations, so it had to be done, and the negotiations had to be done virtually. At the same time, Australia did a very active work at the World Health Organization, WHO, and secured a key resolution about an evaluation of the WHO response to the crisis and focusing on what had to be done in order to have the WHO doing more and better work. And finally, but not least, Korea formed several friend groups in several international organizations, such as the UN, WHO, and even UNESCO, in order to strengthen the international cooperation in healthcare. So you have, in a nutshell, one typical action of the MICTA group, which is based fully in positive diplomacy. We share the chair of this informal grouping every year. Mexico and Korea have been twice the leaders of the MICTA group for 1 year each, and this year it's to Australia to conduct our business. So that's, in a nutshell, what we dolphins can do in this dangerous sea. Thank you.
Thank you. We've grown from a shrimp to a dolphin then. Next, Ambassador Ramzi Taimrov.
Thank you very much, Dr. Song. It's a great pleasure to be here joining my colleagues to addressing this important audience, and I thank the organizers of today's event, Chosun TV, for having this opportunity to us. I would like briefly inform about Azerbaijan-Korea relations, although next year we will celebrate the 30th anniversary of our diplomatic relations. But however, if you take a look to our bilateral relations, it's more going back more intensive times since the 2006, when jointly we opened the embassies in both countries, and since that time we have been observing the intensive bilateral relations between our two countries. And this year, apparently, there are new opportunities for development of our bilateral relations. As you may know, last year Azerbaijan experienced the war conflict, and finally, after 30 years of almost occupation of its territories, Azerbaijan restored its territorial integrity. And the territories that liberated are almost on the same size of state of Lebanon. So therefore, and it's devastated. The results, outcomes are devastated, totally destroyed territories, and definitely we need to reconstruct those areas. And we are keen and interested to cooperate with the Republic of Korea in that field. Recently, we had the visit of the Speaker of the National Assembly to the Republic of Azerbaijan in August. And just yesterday, the chairman of the Presidential Committee on Northern Economic Cooperation was in Azerbaijan, and in both visits we had a meeting with the president, and President, His Excellency Ilham Aliyev, invited Korean companies to take part on this reconstruction projects. And another topic mostly I wanted to talk about is since Azerbaijan is just out of the new conflict, I mean the relapsed conflict, let me say, I wanted to talk about the multilateralism in terms of conflict prevention and conflict resolution. So I have 3 main topics on this issue. First of all, I must tell that as a diplomat, I have to say that there is no alternative of multilateralism for the great security structure of the universe, or of the world, or humanity. So, but we have to, I think, to talk openly, and we have to find out what are the problems of multilateralism, why the numbers of conflicts are increasing year by year, why we cannot prevent the countries to have a conflicts. So this matters. For this purpose, I brought up 3 main subjects. The first one is the validity of the liberal concept of global politics and its ability to resolve the conflicts. The next one would be, in some cases, multilateral diplomatic efforts could actually have made matters worse instead of improving them. That's very important. And the last one, what are the main causes of multilateral diplomacy's failure on preventing the conflicts? From the liberal concept of global politics, I must first of all tell that the multiculturalism is coordinating relations among states based on requiring all states to stand by the same rules, as my colleague already mentioned, or at least majority of them. However, the efficiency of multilateral diplomacy is highly depending on those very norms which can be achieved only if all states are committed to observing them, or majority of them committed to do so. There are certain international mechanisms that allow international community to apply pressures to those states that do not observe those very norms. However, these mechanisms are becoming less effective, mainly due to 2 reasons that is my opinion. First, the lack of unilateral approach on implementation of the requirements and methods, and most importantly, the second, the lack of unilateral stand by the big powers. In the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, unfortunately, we observe in both lackness of multilateralism. That's the reason why, although the first conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan ended in 1994, and since that time we had the negotiations process with the participation of 3 major powers, the United States, Russia Federation, and France, which are the 3 member states of the UN Security Council, we failed to find the resolution. And one of those reasons were apparently of the points that I raised. Another point is the liberal international relation theory is aimed at establishing an international community which is sharing common values and sticking to the common rules. Therefore, contributes to the trust in peace process and making peace intangible. Alternative to the liberal international relations is the realistic approach. that consider the real politics and applies the systematic approach for securing the peace with all means that may include, unfortunately, military operations, if there are no other options. The core principles that the United Nations, which we may call as the liberal concept of multilateral diplomacy, are failing. And I'm going to read some 3 major points that are the core values of the United Nations. It's in the UN Charter, you can read it as well. The first one is to take effective collective measures for prevention and removal of the threats to the peace, and for the suppression of acts of aggression or other breaches of the peace. Well, unfortunately, there are very limited number of cases where all UN Security Council permanent members applied collective measures on suppression of acts of aggression. Second is the principle of justice and international law. Again, unfortunately, what we observe is some cases, UN General Assembly resolutions are playing the role of recommendations, not implementation, while UN Security Council resolutions are implementing with case-by-case approach. So if you take a look to the resolutions adopted by the UN Security Council, unfortunately not all of them are implemented. So this is what I think is the weak points of multilateral diplomacy. To achieve international cooperation in solving international problems of an economic, social, cultural, or humanitarian character, and in promoting and encouraging respect for human rights and for fundamental freedoms for all, without distinction as of race, sex, language, or religion. But let us observe what's going on with the COVID pandemic. Unfortunately, there are certain countries who managed to have access maybe 200% of their population need. But we have some nations, especially in Africa, that cannot even access of 10% of their population to the vaccines. So there is no unilateral approach on that. And that's the reason why, as the chair country of the non-aligned movement, Azerbaijan is chairing the non-aligned movement, which is the second largest international organization after UN, after the United Nations. We proposed the resolution, which is calling ensuring equitable, affordable, timely, and universal access for all countries to vaccines in response to the COVID-19, which is adopted on November 18. However, as I mentioned already, the implementation of this resolution is not promising, unfortunately, due to the lack of this problems, these cases. The second, my point was multilateral diplomatic efforts could actually have made matters worse instead of improving them. In Azerbaijan-Armenian conflict case, we observed that attempts to pursue the policy of finding consensus among the parties is prolonging the conflict resolution. It only motivates the occupier to continue doing nothing and trying to normalize the fact of territorial occupation. The second, prolonging the status quo for the sake of not to allow the conflict to start again. Is it a right approach? I don't think so. Hence, conflict parties are lacking to establish normal relations, thus imposing significant obstacles to their normal development. In addition to that, military tensions are continuing to be the cause of lives. The third point is applying similar legal standards to the conflicts. Unfortunately, this is the case. I had a chance to work like maybe 10 years ago almost in Vienna. In my own experience, I can tell you that while working in the OSCE, Organization of Security Cooperation of Europe, which is the main security structure of the Europe, we observed this lack of approach. Although Armenian-Azerbaijan conflict has similarities with the other conflicts in the Eurasian continent, some of our colleagues, when making reference to the Armenian-Azerbaijan conflict versus the other conflicts, they were releasing not the similar statements, not the similar principles. That's the lack of multilateralism. That's why the multilateralism is lacking on conflict prevention. And the last one is what are the main causes of multilateral diplomacy's failure on preventing conflicts? First of all, I would say that, and first I must say that this must necessarily represent my country's position, but in my own opinion, the power games among the competing powers eventually negatively affecting multilateral efforts in conflict preventions due to their geopolitical interests. Second, big countries simply do not bother to clash over relatively unimportant matters, or simply do not want having additional headaches due to the conflicts that are not in their immediate vicinity. There is a sarcastic worldwide view that the conflicts do not immediately harm big powers do not really matter. This approach is deteriorating the power of international norms and principles that enshrined in UN and other major multilateral organizations' charter. And the last one, which is the most dangerous one, is the growing sense of justice by force. The lack of international pressure towards the aggressor creates the feelings of the world makes no tangible efforts to resolve it, which at the end creates the position of no need for compromise at the aggressor side, while leaving the victim of the conflict no other option but build up her military capability for resolving the conflict militarily. That were the points that I wanted to raise. I thank you very much for this opportunity again. I'm looking forward if there will be any questions. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to invite Ambassador Bader Al-Awadi. You have to leave a bit earlier, I understand. Or can you stay with us until? Oh, okay, okay, okay.
A very good afternoon to everybody, those of you here and watching us remotely. Thank you very much, Professor Song Kyun-jing and Chosun TV for this opportunity. The discussion that I wanted to have today was going to revolve around the African situation, and essentially the need to align the aspirations of Korea with the outcomes that she desires and that also those of us on the African continent are looking for. So just by a quick way of background, I'll touch on the relationship between, okay, this is not quite working. Where's the tech support? You told me to press. Oh, there we go, okay. So just to quickly take a glance at the relationship historically. The Republic of Korea was one of the first countries in Asia to commence a diplomatic engagement with most African states, but it was largely not driven by anything else other than self-interests and the need to compete with Pyongyang, which had invested economically and militarily in some of the countries. Now, post the Cold War, obviously because there are distance issues and limitations in capacity, Africa pretty much faded from Seoul's radar. There was hardly any engagement, and then there was a state visit to Gabon, which was the first, my country, Kenya, Nigeria, and Senegal. But then the attention quickly shifted to a focus on the newly liberalized countries from the USSR. There's a lot of silence until about 2006, when, as was happening elsewhere in the world, the focus now turned to security issues, particularly as relates to energy. And in 2006, Korea then launched the Korea Initiative for Africa's Development under President Roh Moo-hyun. Now, that same year was the year when the first Korea-Africa Forum was held. Oops. Okay, there we go. So the second tier here was, and my sheets are mixed up, was the second Korea-Africa Forum, which was convened 3 years later in 2009. And you can see there's a huge big leap. It's from 2006 to 2009. And that was under a different president. And the attention now was focused on trying to deepen the relationship between Korea and not just bilaterally, but multilaterally, and increasing aid. But if you actually look at the level of aid, which was going to be doubled to 200 million by 2012, 200 million across an entire continent is not a significant amount of aid. With that said, there have been consistent efforts that have been made. There have been state visits across the years. We've had visitations to Congo, Ethiopia. Former President Park visited Kenya, Ethiopia as well, because you have historic ties with Ethiopia and Uganda during her trip. And then under this current administration, we've had visits to Ghana, South Africa, Ethiopia, and most recently, there was a round in Western Africa, Nigeria, I think in Senegal as well. Now, what the government also decided to undertake was building the capacity of the African civil servant. So there have been lots of training programs that have targeted civil servants, especially at the master's level programs. COICA has undertaken quite a few infrastructure projects, including in Ghana and Tanzania, less in most other countries. And most recently, there was the establishment of KIND, which is the Korea Overseas Infrastructure and Urban Development Project, which, as a matter of fact, is housed in Nairobi. And the objective here is to try and penetrate space that Korea has thus far been somewhat, struggling with, because the engagement has not been at the level that it would prefer. Now, what exactly informs Korea's approach? It's actually quite simple. I mentioned earlier the need for food security, which is quite common, energy security, and exports. This is an export-driven country. I mean, you've got high-tech exports that you need to find markets for, and not only exporting what you have technologically, but also exporting your infrastructure know-how and development. Ultimately, the goal is to pursue global power. But in doing so, the approach has been one that pretty much extracts more than it delivers, other than giving development experience. Now, if you don't know much, you appreciate a lesson. We definitely appreciate the technical transfer. We need it because, capacity-wise, we're rather, stretched. However, having the capacity is one thing. Having the capacity to implement is another thing. And this has been one of the main challenges that we on the continent have. Now, let's look at how Korea has embarked on achieving these objectives, the food and energy security, infrastructure development, etc. If you look at this next slide, there's a map on it. And you'll notice that there's 24 embassies and or consulates, because in countries such as Nigeria, there's both an embassy and a consulate, that Korea has in Africa. So that's a pretty significant presence. Kenya is one of them. As a matter of fact, the Korean government established its diplomatic relationships with us in 1964, which was just after our independence. But if you look a little deeper into what the Koreans really think about Africa, notwithstanding the fact that Korea has a presence, a diplomatic presence in about half the continent, you will notice that the knowledge and the perception is very, very limited, and in some ways a little skewed. From a cultural perspective, if you come from a country like Kenya, the first thing that we're identified with is our coffee. Generally speaking, and I have seen images here on TV, especially from the NGO community. You've got the stereotypical branding of poverty. Then you've got, tribal culture, safaris, Maasais, but at a governmental and political level, and understandably so, by the way, we have developed this perception of constantly struggling with leadership issues, of being politically unstable, of being insecure, violent, and just a tumultuous continent. As a result of that, especially for the investment community, we're viewed as high risk because of not only that instability, but also matters relating to corruption. One of the things that has struck me since I've been here, and I arrived here pretty much about a year ago, I came in November of last year, when I meet, surprisingly, even the business community, and I'm talking, the chambers of commerce and their leadership, the first thing they say is, Korea has not really been engaging with Africa because Africa is so far. And that always astounds me, because far from what? China is not that much further from Korea, and we have a significant Chinese presence. You have other Asian countries that are equally distant, but not too distant, particularly as we live in a global village today. But then, of course, the other thing is the natural resources, and Africa is, as everybody knows, the last frontier. So you've seen the diplomatic footprint, you've heard the overall objectives, but what really is Korea's foreign policy in a snapshot? The reality is, and this is why I have the map of Africa there, is there seems to be an approach of looking at Africa as one unit. But Africa may be a unit in terms of being a continent, but it comprises very, very, very individual, very different, very diverse and complex countries, which cannot, as much as we are seeking integration, be looked at as a single unit. The approach, therefore, overshadows the fact that we have our individuality, and there's a sense of indifference. And to this day, notwithstanding what we see as some rising interest, there still is engagement at infrequent levels. For instance, we have what we do appreciate as the Korea-Africa forums, but those take place on average now about every 5 years. I don't know how countries in Africa or a continent such as Africa can develop really, really meaningful relationships when they hold such forums at such long intervals. Overall, the levels of ODA are very, very low, particularly when you consider the rising economic status of Korea. FDI, similarly, is also very low. And trade, not just overall trade and bilateral trade, is also very low, which means naturally, while there's the focus on the region, Asia, and you've got, FTAs and everything with other areas, there's still an overlooking of Africa as a continent. By and large, the engagement is one-dimensional, where you find, for instance, one of the complaints that I hear very frequently from my colleagues is that it is very difficult for an African diplomat to engage even MOFA, for instance. It's very difficult to knock on MOFA's door and have ready access to somebody, say, as the DG. Whereas the reverse is true when diplomats from Korea are in Africa. They even enjoy ready access to the highest levels of government, including the cabinet. So if indeed we are to have a meaningful relationship, I think there's need to look at these this kind of contact and align it with making sure that it is satisfactory and meaningful to both. Why do I say that? If you look at what Africa comprises and what Africa has to offer, there's a lot more than meets the eye. There are a total of 8 regional groups. I just have highlighted a few there: COMESA, the EAC, SADC, ECOWAS, and most recently, the initiative to create an integrated market across Africa, which is the Free Continental Trade Agreement. Now, what does that exactly mean to Korea? Number one, in COMESA alone, there are 19 members. In the ECOWAS, there's 15. The EAC has, a common market of 6 members. Negotiations are underway about having a single currency, just like the EU. You've got EGAD. There's an ETA that is under formation. SADC has 16 members. You've got the Arab League, which has 5 members, and there are ongoing negotiations also for an FTA. But economically, what does that mean? You've got 1.27 billion people projected to be in this region by 2030. That is a colossal amount of ready market, not to mention that you have a growing and expanding middle class, which is approximated to reach 600 million by 2030.
Ambassador, I do not want to disrupt you, but for
I'm
the
running short of
time's
time.
sake, can you
Yes.
please finish it in 2 minutes' time?
Yes, I will do that. Overall, what we need from Korea is for it to take cognizance of the economic power that Africa offers. Korea has FTAs with every, you can look at that map, with all the other regions outside of Africa. We are also saying that outside of that being a contradiction, the US, for instance, also has, now it has an FTA with Morocco. It's going to have an FTA with Kenya as the first sub-Saharan country. Now, to conclude, this is the bottom line. When you pursue a low-risk strategy, you receive low yield. And if Korea wants to receive the outcomes that it is desirous of with Africa, it needs to put in a lot more effort to align itself with where Africa is right now. We're pursuing a spirit of Pan-Africanism. We are better able to negotiate. Before we had bad experiences. We are more inward-looking, and we are looking to engage you, but we are also more comfortable with the devil that we know. So my last parting shot here is, if you look at the quick wins, let us look at things that are of common value to us, such as right now climate change and health and food security and things like that. You've got countries like ours that are struggling with adaptation. We cannot afford the cost of 62 billion by 2030. Importantly, in an era of COVID, you have smaller countries that are supporting us on the health angle, including by donating vaccines. Greece, Latvia, countries like that have supported us. My urge to Korea as a government and the people of Korea is seek our trust, seek our understanding, leverage the cultural diplomacy that you have, restructure your ODA, align your awareness with your entities on ground, such as COTRA, which really has the capacity to be transformed into a real engine of trade promotion that has visible outcomes. We are welcoming of partnerships at bilateral levels and private partnerships, and we look forward to engaging you more at the embassy. We're an embassy that's open for business. Our country's open for business, indeed. The continent is as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Your message is well received. Korea needs to take the best opportunities Africa offers. And I'm sure someday, sooner or later, the Korean government will approach Africa for a free trade agreement. Okay, with that, can I invite our last speaker, Ambassador Bader Al-Abadi.
Thank you very much. First of all, Ms. Professor Song Kyung-jin, thank you very much for many things. First, to make me the last one so I can listen to this marvelous, introduction from my colleagues, and to let me with the colleague that I like so much. And secondly, to allow us to have our voice reached to everybody. It became difficult for us sometimes, especially to present our messages and voices to the Korean public and colleagues in Korea to tell them what we have and what's the update. This is very important for me personally as Ambassador of Kuwait and as a Dean of the Arab Ambassadors. I wish you can give me time the same you give everybody, please, since I'm the last one. I will talk as everybody here. First, I will talk in two hats, as Ambassador of Kuwait and briefly as the Dean of Arab Ambassadors. With Kuwait, there is many things I can talk, but I will briefly go through it quickly. Kuwait was, we always said, we've been the door of Korean government and companies to the Middle East and to the Gulf and the Middle East and the Arab countries. And I will share with you some information. For instance, the first oil shipment started to flow from Kuwait to Korea in 1963. Kotra opened their first office in 1969. 1972 trade office, Korean trade office opened in Kuwait. 1979 came the diplomatic relationship. So we have history, and I can rely what the ambassador of Kenya said. The history also, all ambassadors tackled a little bit about the history relation between Korea and the other countries, and among them Kuwait, is very important. And this is my message, that Korea should rely in the historical relationship they have with the countries. To not forget this historical relationship is very important. Interests can change, everything can change, but the historical and friendship should be always continue. And this is very, very important. And that's why we are happy to see this friendship between Korea and Kuwait going on. And second thing I will say, Korea was always, for Kuwait, the most important player in implementing Kuwait development plan since 70s. We've been building. That's what makes Kuwait the largest third upon the land and Ministry of Land and Infrastructure. Kuwait is the third in the Middle East or the world for the Korean companies. They gain like $40 billion of implementing of construction contracts in Kuwait, which make Kuwait in the infrastructure is very important market for Korean companies, and that built a partnership with many Korean companies like SK and Hyundai and all of them, most of the NGS, and I can mention a lot. And the second, or the most important also relation, we have the oil, as Kuwait from 60, as he said, 63, we start to export the oil for Korea, and we became the second largest crude oil exporter for Korea. Somehow now third to second, but we still continue. Our relation and friendship with Korea, in terms of politically and economically, let us always stay beside Korean companies and government. And for instance, during the pandemic, as Korea helped us so quickly in terms of their models and their kits, and to buy the kits from Korean companies to as a collective effort to prevent the spread of corona. Also, we assure Korea, was the first message sent by my MOFA to Korea, that the oil will be continue during the pandemic and whatever the circumstances, we didn't stop, and that was very, very important message from us. In the other fields, we cooperate the health. There is many Kuwaiti who come here to benefit from the medical services in Korea. Also training, until 2019, for instance, we have like around 500 Kuwaiti trainee came in the oil field to train here in Korea. In the field of military training was one of the fields that we tackled recently before the corona, and investment. Also in the investment, as I said, we have many investment, indirect or direct investment in Korean companies, especially in the communication and biotechnology and bioindustry field. The political cooperation between the two countries is tremendous, as big, and we share the same value of adhere to the UN Charter and non-intervention and solve the conflicts in the peaceful means that we share with Korea. Also, we support each other in the elections very well, and that's one of the important of this relation. That always we rely on us and we consult, and I insist and emphasize consultation and keep talking is very important, to help each other to understand the issue. Many times, our Korean friends, we talk and we listen for them regarding the North Korea issue. Many times we sit together and we talk about Middle East issue and they listen to us. And here the point is very important. When I say communication, communication goes both ways, that we communicate with Korean and the Korean communicate with us, especially here the ambassadors can give a lot of positive opinion. And just for example, we sitting here and I listen for all my colleagues ambassadors or their messages. They've been sharing with us and very important message that we should, here Korea should take advantage from this information that's been put on the table today. As I said, now where we're going, when the pandemic started and as all countries start to collaborate with Korea quickly to stop the spread of the corona, Kuwait was one. We are thankful to the Korean government and companies to be always the priority to have our needs from the Korean markets to stop the spread of the corona, and we started now to talk about what is coming between Korea and Kuwait, and there is many coming in the pipeline. We are starting to talk about the role of Korea and the opportunity for Korean companies in the Kuwait Vision 2035. And Kuwaiti side, we MOFA headed a committee, which is we agreed in 2019 to create, we welcome to create a committee, Kuwait-Korea Committee for Vision 2035. And this vision has a lot of projects. It could go more than $200 billion. And we had a first meeting for Kuwaiti side to put forward what opportunity can Korean companies benefit from in 2035. And now we are engaging with the Korean side, with the MOFA, Korean MOFA, to discuss how to start to cooperate and communicate within the Vision 2035 committee. This is to give you how important this historical and economical relation that led Korea to one of the most important parts of the world. Since '60, Korea was with us, and it came to the area with other Arab countries, and that's we cherish. We are proud about it, and we should talk about it a lot, and should be always the basic of our consultation and talk, because this is trust. There's a lot of trust built during these years, and the result, what we see now, as I mentioned, this huge economic relation between Korea and Kuwait and the Arab world. For instance, with now, I think I'm very happy to say that I see a very fast move from our Korean colleague and Said Mofa toward the Arab countries, especially to resume some talk with the GCC regarding the FTA, the free trade agreement, and there is a news about free trade with Egypt. They're talking now, and there's one point in the history of the years of like 5-6 years was the trade between the Arab countries and Korea reached to $170 billion annually. It's a huge. So our message as a dean of our ambassador that Arab countries deserve to be looked at as a strategic partner, all together. That's what I want to say, and thank you very much for all of you for listening to me. And any question, brief, I can answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Awadi. If I may choose one or two keywords that runs through all the 6 presentations, I would say communication and cooperation. In what areas? The ambassadors pointed out such areas as climate change, Indo-Pacific, of course, the pandemic issue, and multilateral cooperation like MICTA, and come to Africa and do invest in Africa and take advantage of the opportunities Africa offers. And the same goes to Kuwait and the Arab world. Of course, the Central Asia. Well, this special session was made really to give you an opportunity, the ambassadors, to speak your mind. You know, it sounds such an oxymoron to ask the ambassadors to speak their mind, because ambassadors are supposed to be diplomatic. Anyways, we have only 5 or so minutes, but I would still like to ask questions to you. Ambassador Catherine Rapper, do you see any, how do I say, possibility or an opportunity for Korea and Australia to cooperate bilaterally or trilaterally or plurilaterally in the Indo-Pacific region? For instance, you have a trilateral cooperation with the US, Japan on infrastructure in the Indo-Pacific, and you have US, Japan, Indonesia, Australia, trilateral partnership, and something like that. To that effect, do you foresee a possibility between Australia and Korea? And Ambassador Castillo Fernandez, on climate change, Korea and Europe are advanced in terms of developing technology. For instance, in our efforts to reduce carbon emissions, the carbon storage, utilization, and technology will be critical and instrumental in reducing carbon emissions. And the technology is, the initial technology is there, but it's too expensive, and we need to develop a more affordable technology in our effort for that. I know you're not a technology person, and neither am I, but if you could, elaborate further on the technological side in terms of our effort in trying to reduce carbon emissions, and any cooperation possibility between the EU and Korea. I'll start with the Australian ambassador, and I'll get back to the other ambassadors later after this first round.
Thank you very much. And yes, of course, there's many opportunities for Australia and the Republic of Korea to work together in the Indo-Pacific region. We have both been members of APEC, of course, for many years, and there's also the RCEP agreement that Australia just completed our ratification of, and Korea is very close for that agreement to enter into force early in the year. I mentioned briefly in my remarks that Korea has its new southern policy, and Australia has our own Indo-Pacific strategies. And one of the ways that we've been working together this year is looking at our partnerships with Southeast Asian countries and ASEAN, and ways that we can do complementary work together with those partners. For example, earlier this year, we had a vaccines workshop where we looked at ways that we can coordinate with our Southeast Asian partners on the delivery of safe and effective vaccines, as well as looking at the economic recovery from COVID-19 and how we can contribute there. So I think watch that space. I think there's room for more collaboration in that respect. I'm also conscious that both Australia and Korea are important trading partners and investors in that region, and so we'll certainly look for ways that we can combine and make sure our efforts continue to be complementary. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Castillo Fernandez.
Thank you, Dr. Son. Technology and innovation are going to be key in this very important global transformation for all of us. It costs, of course, but the cost of non-inaction are even higher than the cost of action. So therefore you need to bring together private sector, you need to bring together public sector. We are putting an enormous amount of money together with the climate action. Of course, you cannot put a big European Green Deal without an important funding in it, and it's going to be about 1.3 trillion euros of funding for all this big digital and green transformation. The European Investment Bank, for example, more than 30% of the projects are going to be green. Our development cooperation, and I'm sorry I haven't heard Europe in Africa also, because I mean we have been the biggest donor and partner in Africa, where also our more than 1/3 of our projects are going to be helping the green transformation. So you have it on our public investment bank going to put enormous amount of funding into this green technology. And for those funds, also Korean companies can benefit. I mean, there is also an example already of hydrogen, working on the hydrogen by Korean companies, which with funds of the European Investment Bank. So that also covers Korean companies, but you also need to look at the research funds. This is a lot about working more together on research, and Korea has not been so much into the collaborations on research and innovation. I think we need to bring them more in. That's why I mentioned before this association of the big program of research, 95 billion euros that we have for 7 years on the Horizon to Europe, a big program where climate and digital and health are key issues of what we are going to try to do. So yes, it is difficult, it's costly. Private sector cannot do it alone, even if they are in some cases, you know, have perhaps the qualifications, the innovation, but we need to do it together. And I think this time governments have to help local communities, have to help SMEs, have to help the big corporations as well to do together this transition.
I'd like to make you, the EU, a special request. You know, Korea spends 4.6% over of its GDP on research and development. And the effectiveness, well, is still a question. And when it comes to the research, I mean R&D, international collaboration, I always hear, where's Korea? You should, you know, invite them on, knocking at the door of Korean researchers, and you know, invite them to bring them into the international collaboration scene. Well, yeah, thank you. Ambassador Figueroa, well, you mentioned about the MICTA's role in pushing for the vaccination pledge and expediting vaccination. Can you please further elaborate on that? And has there been any concrete outcome out of it? And what's your vision or prospect of the MICTA down the road?
Thank you very much. Very pertinent question. MICTA is discreet diplomacy, as is all diplomacy. Only war makes a lot of noise. And we see the results of war immediately. We don't see the results of diplomacy that fast, unfortunately. So we have to have this perspective to understand that any initiative from one, several, many countries together in diplomacy take time to mature and to present results. The fact is that regarding COVID-19, Mexico, Korea, and many other countries were strongly vocal about the fact 1 year ago, 1.5 years ago, that things were not going to be easy, and solutions, unfortunately, from the point of view of the technology, were in the hands of very few, especially vaccines. So we were very vocal about the fact that vaccines should reach everybody in the world and should be, if not free, at least at very low cost. Did we succeed? Not as much as we wanted, clearly. It is still sad to see that many countries in the world, and especially developing countries, are still far away from the numbers we see in developed countries. And especially in Africa, that's a greater issue than in Latin America, where more or less, I would say more than 70% of our populations have had the vaccines. And that's why we have to keep pushing. We have to leave the message on the table. The worst mistake is to say, oh, this didn't work, so we take it off the table. And that's what in MECTA we want to be doing, to keep pushing about environment, about peace and security, and many other issues that are so important to all of us.
Correct. Diplomacy requires patience and perseverance, although we live in shortism these days. Okay. Ambassador Temirov, you talked about multilateralism. You did not talk about specifically on the Azerbaijan and Korea relationship. If you are to choose one single most important thing bilaterally, what would you say?
Well, this is a very tough question to choose one out of many things. But
you have only 1 minute.
yeah, and this is the worst. So I would say that Korea, Azerbaijan sharing many historical and cultural similarities, and the miracle of Han River is the thing that we want to do in our country and in our region. Therefore, sharing Korean know-how with the countries like Azerbaijan and South Caucasus and Central Asia, and definitely not only just bringing the technology, but also investing to those people who are there, and to be able to make them sure that they will be able to use this technology. So I think this would be the most important part. Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador Munzi, if you are to choose of many, many important things you presented, if you are to choose one single most important thing that Korea should focus on in its relationship with Africa?
I would say the nexus between manufacturing and health. Those are two of our priority areas. Korea has done an astronomical job when it comes to the development of its biopharma. You mentioned R&D. Your labor costs are high. Kenya is actually collaborating with entities such as IVI. We've done lots of clinical researches, clinical trials. We have a market that is ready to embrace what you have in biopharma and the cosmetic industry, to export into the rest of Africa and into Europe. Our costs are low, our skilled labor exists. I think it would be a great synergy between us and something that would be a quick win-win for both. Thank you.
That's very interesting. Thank you. Well, time is up, and I'd like to continue this discussion, but because the time's up, I'll have to wrap it up. But before I wrap it up, if you have a burning say or anything to add, no. Okay. I hope you enjoy this session as much as I did. I hope we can have more of this in the future, and I'll try my best to continue this spirit and make it happen with my capacity, however small and however limited. Again, my deep appreciation goes to all the ambassadors present today, and my special thanks go to TV조선, who willingly agreed to my idea of making this special session. With that, I thank you very much, and I thank the audience participating online. Thank you very much.
Now this marks the end of all the special session, and once again, thank you very much, Dr. Song Kyung-jin, and thank you to our distinguished all ambassadors. And why don't we give them another big round of applause, everyone? 네, 다시 한번 뜨거운 박수 부탁드립니다. 네, 이것으로 저희의 스페셜 세션은 모두 마치도록 하겠습니다. 잠시 장례 정리를 하는 동안 휴식 시간을 가진 후 5번째 서브 세션을 진행하도록 하겠습니다. 잠시만 기다려 주시기 바랍니다. 감사합니다.